Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Candidate Master KZ 2008, rated 2202. We're playing, I believe, a 15 plus 10 game. Their seat just came up and I clicked on it. All right, shall we play a Smith-Morra Gambit? I'm going to try to gambit something. I was talking with the student about gambits today and how the old masters liked gambits and seemed to understand the value in clearing lines for their pieces to come into play. So let's play knight f3 here. I play the Smith-Morra Gambit on stream sometimes, and I'm by no means an expert on it, I should say that. So if my opponent chooses a theoretically challenging line, this is going to get very interesting. But I am spoiling for a fight, and I need to focus more than I did in my last standard game, that's for sure. Against Lego Coffee, my thought process was pretty erratic there. So let's see if I can put on a good performance today. One that I'm satisfied with, no matter what the result is. Okay, so knight ge7. Yeah, this is a pretty solid, dependable system for black, covering this and this. Think about bishop g5 to pin the knight on e7. In some respects, it's tempting to play e5 with an eye towards playing knight e4. I'd love to just plunk a knight on d6 and smothered mate my opponent, but on e5 he'll probably play knight g6, so I kind of think this is the way you want to go. Yeah, h6, I'm going to keep the pin here. So CM is a FIDE title, if you're wondering what that is. It means Candidate Master. I don't exactly know what the FIDE rating requirement is to get the CM title. I want to say 2100? I'm not sure. But yeah, with that title on chess.com, they're eligible to participate in Title Tuesday, for instance. Okay, so backing off the bishop. If black plays g5, I'll play bishop g3, and I like the look of my bishop on this diagonal. I could have played bishop f4 right away, but it's more helpful to induce these moves and then play the bishop here, because that puts black's king in, some future jeopardy if he ever castles kingside, and just puts a question mark around the black king. So black is thinking about what to do here. I mean, b5 looks pretty normal, attacking the bishop. But if b5, I may already consider playing bishop takes b5, a takes b5, knight takes b5, and trying to make this knight d6 idea a reality. I wonder if that would work. I guess black has d5, but things are starting to open up. Okay, well, I may have this decision on my hands. Yeah, so bishop takes b5, a takes b5, knight takes b5, threatening knight d6 mate pretty emphatically. Black doesn't have time to play g6 or something, or even f6 to give the king an escape route. So I think at that point d5 would be the critical move, because then the queen would help cover here. I could play maybe bishop g3 there. Looks pretty interesting. Helping out knight c7 and knight d6. I'm going to think about that a little bit, but bishop b3 is my backup move, just to identify my candidates here. It's going to be one of these two moves. I'm not going to put the bishop anywhere else. Yeah, take, knight takes, and then d5. Bishop g3. Could also throw in pawn takes. I mean, pawn takes and then bishop g3 also seems pretty good. That might even stop black playing something like e5. So yeah, pawn takes. Looks pretty darn interesting. It looks like I take the initiative. It does not seem easy for black at all to defend that. I'm going to do it. And if black doesn't take my bishop, let's say they play g5, I'm going to have the option of bishop takes c6 if I want, so I'm not too worried. I might also just play bishop g3, because after a takes b5, knight takes b5, knight d6 is still a threat, and again, the bishop coming back here just aids in me playing knight c7 or even bishop c7. So we'll see what black thinks about this. Let's pre-move this capture. So things are getting sharp here right from the get-go. Smith-Morra is very interesting, this opening. One practical consideration, if you're thinking about playing this line for white, black can try to avoid it entirely. Not so much d4, of course, if they play the Sicilian, but after c takes d4, c3, playing knight f6 on move 3 instead of taking the pawn on c3. Knight f6 is a good way to sidestep the main lines of the Smith-Morra. So this rule I've mentioned before, take the first pawn but don't take the second one, that would be the philosophy behind knight f6 just developing. And after e5, knight d5, we're in well-known theoretical territory from the Alapin c3 Sicilian. Likewise, black can play d3 on move 3 if they want to decline the pawn. That's often what I do as black. I think taking is the best move and accepting the gambit, but it does lead to complicated play, and I think white has full compensation. I don't think white is better, but I think good compensation for white, definitely in a practical sense. Maybe engines can prove an edge for black, but I think it's a lot of effort, and it's also going to require quite a bit of a strong memory, because you're probably not going to face the Smith-Morra Gambit all that much if you play the Sicilian, and racking your brain trying to come up with a refutation of it, the one out of every 20 games that you get in e4 c5 is pretty difficult unless you're reviewing your lines constantly and feel very okay about accepting a gambit pawn. So I tend to be a little more risk averse with those things, and I think not playing the gambit playing into the gambit acceptance is totally fine. All right, so I've got my opponent thinking. That's nice for a change. Yeah, given that he's considering a takes b5 at length, I would say there's a good chance he does not capture and instead tries to play some sort of developing move. Maybe bishop b7 or something. But I still retain a lot of the advantages of my position, and I got my pawn back. So because thinking for a long time here and then capturing when he already seems to sense the danger, that'd be a bit surprising unless he can solve the issues with d5. But it does look to me like, so when my knight lands on b5 and black plays d5, that e takes d5 is promising. And again, I also think bishop g3 looks promising. One fun line I was looking at, so maybe I'll even, okay, he plays g5. So do I play bishop g3 here and maintain my threats? Definitely leaning towards that. Could play bishop takes c6, but it doesn't feel necessary. Is g4 anything to worry about? Probably not. Yeah, let's just play bishop g3. He may just play bishop g7 now and try to castle. Even though he's played h6 and g5, he might just try to get his king to safety. But I really like my dark square bishop now. It might go to d6 later. I do have to be wary of an f5 type move, if black opts for that at a future date, maybe after bishop g7 and castles. Bishop b7, okay. So backing the bishop off seems fine if I want to play it like that. I also immediately looked at a common Smith-Morra move, which is knight d5. But I don't think I want to be such a hero quite yet. I think that would be premature. But yeah, backing the bishop off, or maybe taking on c6, but I don't think it's great to take on c6. It seems like black will just take with their knight and then try to play bishop e7 or something. Although, I could try to take and then play knight d5. If I play knight d5 right now, pawn takes, pawn takes. If black takes my bishop, what do I have? I mean, I'm down 2 pieces at that point. So I better have something good. And it seems like, I might be able to get one of them back either on c6 or pushing d6, but I'm a little skeptical of that. So, yeah, leaning towards this, or just dropping the bishop back. Bishop c4, bishop a4 maybe. Taking on c6 is probably the most efficient way to play this if I want to try to seek an initiative still. Just trying to think like what the most likely way for black to take back is. Maybe with the bishop to better protect d5. But then I get knight e5 in. That looks kind of nice, actually. So if bishop takes c6, knight takes c6, I'd like to play knight d5 at that point. That's kind of what I'm angling for here. Yeah, let's take. I think with his pawn structure, too, he's got a lot of pawns on light squares in the center here. I don't know if I'd drop my bishop to c4 that it would even be that good. So taking, trying to accelerate the play seems fine. Okay, it does take with the knight. So here's where knight d5 is definitely up for consideration. Yeah, typical knight drop into the position. And if e takes d5, I'm ready to play my rook to e1. The knight will be hit. If knight e7, I play d6 with great effect. Yeah, it looks like if he takes it, I'm in pretty good shape. So I guess the question is if he doesn't take it, let's say he plays rook c8, just guarding against knight c7. What do I do then? Maybe rook e1? Or some sort of calmer move even, like rook c1, perhaps? Queen b3, maybe? I guess there's quite a few options. Kind of like queen b3. All right, let's do it. Time management-wise, doing just fine here. Spent a while on bishop takes c6. Actually spent longer on bishop takes c6 than I did on bishop takes b5. And he spent a lot of time on g5 deciding whether to take that bishop or not. And probably correctly decided against it. Another move here is d6. I think queen b3 could be a good answer to that as well, although he might play rook b8 then. d6, queen a4 was another thought I had. Trying to pin his knight. d6, knight d4. One other way to play it. Also just rook e1. He's going to take. Wow. Brave player. All right, let's take back. So I think this should guarantee that I can win the piece back at minimum because I'm threatening the knight. And if the knight moves, well, first of all, I'm not exactly sure where the knight would move, but I can play rook e1 check. And after bishop e7, then play d6. And pin that bishop to the king on e8. So I think for that reason, black should not move this knight. Same thing if they play knight e7, by the way. I can still play d6. I'm on the knight, and if the knight moves rook e1 is going to be painful. So if I were black, I would not move the knight and instead try to develop. But I think it's already pretty sketchy for black because I can take, and I may have rook e1, and black's at least 2 moves away from castling, moving the bishop and castling. So they're going to have to interrupt that sequence by recapturing on c6, and I should be in great shape. So really liking the direction this is going. I'm freezing right now, by the way. I neglected to turn the heat on right now, and it's still pretty cold in Minnesota. I mean, there's not snow on the ground or anything, but 40s, 50s. It was a really rainy day. Definitely should have turned the heat on because I'm kind of shivering right now, even though I'm drinking warm tea. I don't think throwing in g4 for black ever really changes much, especially again since when I take, I'm immediately on the bishop. Yeah, just a lot of stuff black has to navigate here. Let's say they play bishop b4, trying to just develop the bishop to a safe square and get ready to castle. I can take c6, and if black, for example, takes with the bishop, queen d4 already hits 2 undefended pieces. The bishop that will be on b4 and the rook on h8. And that will win material. So just an example of the stuff that black has to watch out for. Probably they could take with the pawn there, but queen b3 even with the bishops lined up here and here. It's not looking good. But let's keep the pedal to the floor. Now I'm starting to build a bit of a time edge, and hopefully I can press my opponent and keep the initiative. By the way, if you're interested in the Smith-Morra Gambit, I highly recommend a book published by international master Mark Esserman. Full disclosure, he is a friend of mine. He wrote a book a few years ago called Mayhem in the Morra, and he's considered, I think, the foremost expert in the world on this opening. And he spent hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of hours analyzing and playing this opening for white. So, he actually gave me a signed copy of that book, which is really cool of him. Publisher is Quality Chess. We've been trying to get it on Chessable, and that may actually happen in the future, but I think it needs a bit of conversion work to get it Chessable ready. So Mark, if you're watching, hopefully you approve of my Morra play so far. And I'm going to look this line up afterwards. Yeah, so very long think here for black. See, I think if you capture on d5, you got to know what you're doing next. I don't like that decision just in a vacuum. I think you got to be pretty confident of how you're going to play it when white recaptures, because I'm expressing a lot of skepticism about black's position here, which I think is warranted. I do think it's borderline losing, if not losing already. But even still, time management wise, as if I'm the one who should be giving time management tips in this series, but it just seems like if you're going to make that capture, you got to play your next move pretty fast. I do think d6 was a legitimate option, though. I'm kind of curious how I would have played in that case. So that's something I'll look at in the analysis. I think at this point he knows he's going to have to give the piece back, and he's just trying to figure out the best way to survive and try to get castled. It's not easy, though. I mean, maybe just bishop e7. Bishop e7, take, and then probably bishop takes. That doesn't look so bad. I mean, I have moves like queen d4, knight e5. He's probably going to get castled, though. On knight d4 actually looks pretty appealing there. Yeah, bishop e7, d takes c6, bishop takes c6, knight d4. And if castles jump that knight into f5, that looks really nice. I'd be hitting h6. I'd also be threatening, and he does play that. Okay. So I think I'm going to play the capture on c6 pretty fast here. d6, bishop f6, and then king f8 doesn't make sense. So yeah, let's go for this. But yeah, if I can get that knight established on f5, I really, really like my game. So knight d4, castles, knight f5. Yeah, that looks good. Knight e5 is an alternative, but I could try putting some pressure on the bishop, but considering he's going to castle next, I don't think it yields much. So let's do this. And put him back on the clock here, under 5 minutes. Okay, knight f5. Multi-purpose move. Threatens the capture on e7, followed by bishop d6, and also threatens this. So looks like he's going to punt that h6 pawn. Do I take it right away, or queen h5 maybe? Even bishop d6 is a move. Options. Oh, okay, he resigned. Bit of a premature end, but yeah, maybe he missed that I can take this pawn. That does look pretty darn good. But I would have spent a little time just debating, because this also looks strong. So yeah, take here, king g7, check. With my queen joining in, it looks pretty bad. But I wouldn't say resignable quite yet. King g6, probably queen here, lining up some stuff, and king h7 walks into queen h5, so probably king back to g8 would be played. And maybe bishop d6 now. Bishop d6, rook e8. Let's say queen h5, threatening this. Does look pretty bad. He's down a pawn. I have a free attack. But again, I wouldn't resign there. Okay, so this game kind of got short-circuited, but I think it was still interesting. So we'll have a look in the analysis here. Let me switch over to the analysis board right away. So as I was saying, there's a couple good ways for black to decline the gambit if they want. Knight f6 is perfectly fine. Attack this pawn. e5, knight d5. We're in the main line of one of the main lines of the Alapin. You can also play d3, just to try to bottle up white's development, because the pawn on c3 stands poorly in the sense that it's blocking white's knight from its natural developing square. So d3 also is fine. But yeah, to capture an e6. I think this is one of the more challenging lines at black's disposal. e6, a6. One of the classic kind of traps in the Smith-Morra is if black plays d6, bishop c4, knight f6. Looks decent, bringing the knights out, right? But e5 is known to give white good play, and especially if black takes it now, black can easily land in trouble. Like, let's say they take with the knight. Then you have this old tactic, deflect the king and then win the queen. And also, if pawn takes e5, you actually trade queens here, because note that bishop takes f7 wouldn't be as good, because king takes f7 and the queen is defending, or the knight is defending the queen, rather. So you actually take, you trade queens. And if they play king takes, you can jump in here and attack f7. And if they take with the knight, you play knight b5 and attack c7. So you kind of alternate between attacking f7 or c7, depending upon what black does. And I actually had a game one time, I think it was in an Arena Kings, that went like this. Check. Black played king d7 trying to guard c7, but ended up getting checkmated. So don't do that if you're black, but that's one of the first lines you learn when you play the Smith-Morra. So black played e6, e6 and a6. So protecting these squares, these weak squares. And I think bishop g5 is pretty helpful. Because as I was saying, if you play bishop f4, even though you've got this nice diagonal, black's going to play knight g6 and start unwinding. Get the bishop out and try to castle. So bishop g5 was an attempt to mess with that. Yeah, and this was about where my theoretical knowledge stopped. I want to say black should play f6 here, although I also don't want to make a fool of myself and try to quote theory I'm not sure about. But even though Ben says never play f6, this would break the pin. If bishop h4, black can now play knight g6 again and hope to get their king to safety here. So, like I said, I'm gonna check on that. But in my neophyte Smith-Morra Gambit eyes here, it looks like b5 is a mistake. I mean, maybe h6 is okay, but b5 definitely looks like a mistake, because I think after takes in this critical line, it's just knight d6 is too big of a threat. And again, d5, I was thinking either bishop g3 or takes. Taking looks probably the better way to go, because black's pinned with the knight, and if they take with the queen, they run into the royal fork here, knight c7. So pawn takes, but then I think just bishop here, threatening knight c7, threatening knight d6. Looks like a lot of fun for white. Or alternatively, again, like I think bishop g3 right away. I mean, also perfectly good. There was some line I was considering here. Can't remember. I was going to mention it during the game, but then he ended up playing g5 instead of taking on b5. I can't quite recall what it was, but yeah, I'll look at it with the engine, but I feel pretty good about that sacrifice of the piece. So g5, and then I just played bishop g3. Seems to make sense. Yeah, black develops, since now if they take, this is just an improved version of that other line because the black's already played g5, which actually helps me here. Because knight d6 is still a threat, along with these two threats. So not a surprise that black declined the bishop again. Bishop b7. Yeah, and I think this makes sense too. Like I said, given black's pawn structure, my bishop is actually not that good. Like playing bishop c4 and just having the bishop shooting into two connected pawns didn't seem that effective. So keep black responding to threats. Try to keep the initiative here. I was just talking with a student today about the initiative. Capel, if you're watching, hope you're checking this video out. This might be very relevant to our discussion. But yeah, you're trying to create threats that lead to other threats is the whole idea of seizing the initiative and running with the initiative. And I have a development lead here. I'm castled. My opponent is not. As I said, he needs, once he gets his knight free here, he needs minimum 2 moves to get castled. Bring the bishop out and then castle it. Actually execute castling. I guess he could go to g7 as well, but that window of opportunity is something that's going to go away pretty quickly if I play, normal but not very incisive moves like bishop c4, rook e1, queen e2, rook d1. Then he's going to get coordinated and he might be able to keep the position together. So if I can play moves that force him to respond and don't contribute to his goals of getting the bishop out and castling, then I stand a good chance of maybe drumming up a decisive attack as I did in the game. So that's what fueled this knight d5 decision, and it's a very common Smith-Morra thing to do, drop your knight on d5 and open lines. So I think taking is probably, I'll go out on a limb and say this is the decisive mistake, even though the game was looking like it was going to continue towards the end. But I just think black's position is so unpleasant here that black should not do this. I guess I would be more worried about d6. d6 seems pretty reasonable to me, because that stops the threat of knight c7 because the bishop is blocked. And I can't go to f6 because the queen takes. So I'm at a bit of an impasse here. I was thinking rook e1 would be a standard move. But queen b3 also looks kind of tempting. Maybe black can respond knight a5 though. And if queen a4, bishop here, the knight is defended by the queen. So was not sure about that. I mean, maybe I can play knight f6, king e7. It's getting weird. Yeah, rook e1 also looked like a decent option, so that if ever takes, I take with check and open the file. That probably leads to some attacking possibilities, but the thing is, black still doesn't have to take the knight. Maybe bishop g7, trying to castle. I briefly considered if I could play something like that in one of these cases. So queen takes d6, knight f6, and try to go after the queen, but I'm not sure it's ever really working. King e7 and black defense. So I think d6 is critical. I also mentioned queen a4. I mean, that looks tempting as well, to pin the knight. So again, discourage black from doing this, just in a different way. Because now, once black has played d6, like there is more of a chance that they would take, because let's just say hypothetically, let's just say I pass and black takes. Even here, it looks kind of awkward for black, but the main point is when this happens, because black has played d6, I can't advance my pawn to d6 and hope to regain the piece in all cases. So I'm definitely going to take a look at that when we switch on the engine here. But yeah, it takes. Don't like that decision. Yeah, I think, again, I'll say it for the second time, but if you play a move like that, accepting a piece sacrifice, you should play your next move pretty fast, unless you suddenly started seeing problems in one of the lines you considered. But it's just such a dangerous decision with your king in the center that you got to know what you're doing when you play that. And it kind of seemed like black was scrambling for a defense, and he probably played the best way. It's just I think the damage has been done already. If black had captured with the pawn, I was thinking about playing queen b3 and attacking the bishop. That looks very annoying because he can't play rook b8 thanks to my bishop here. I guess he could play bishop c8 maybe and try to put the bishop on e6. That actually looks like a decent way to try to survive, but I already have a lot of tempi moves I can play. Go here, attack the queen. I also see queen c3 hits the rook on h8 and the pawn on c6. Yeah, I mean, it seems like black would be fortunate to lose only a pawn and be able to secure their king. So, I mean, I think the game continuation was probably a better outcome. It's just they resigned before I could decide what to do here. So, okay, so let's switch on the lines here. I guess I'll start with the final position since we're looking at it. So, yeah, the engine does say white has a decisive advantage here after knight takes h6. Knight takes h6, king g7, knight f5. Yeah, I was saying king back to g8 is most likely, because king g6, queen d3 looked really pretty dangerous. Although I did not see bishop b5 looking for a skewer. I kind of assumed that with the double attack possible discoveries that would be bad. But, yeah, bishop b5, the engine says play queen d5 and give up the rook on f1. And still good for white, but hopefully, if this position had occurred, I would have seen queen c2 instead, or maybe considered a different move even. Yeah, knight d6 looks pretty good too. f4 kind of seems like an engine move. Not sure I would have played that, but that also makes sense. You know, looking to open up lines when black's king is the target. I don't think black can hope to survive if something like this happens. Yeah, check on one of these squares now, and with this in mind, yeah, black being unable to retreat should be over. So, yeah, likely would have taken and then played knight f5. Other options here, yeah, bishop d6, always pretty annoying. Just wedge the bishop in and hit the rook. Okay, and let's go back to the opening. I'm not going to use it on the first few moves because this is all normal stuff for the Smith-Morra. Yeah, h6, bishop h4. Okay, and it does look like b5 is a mistake due to bishop takes b5. Yeah, so the engine approves of that decision. So it says instead, black may want to consider g5. Yeah, so this is the move I was saying I was trying to induce by playing bishop g5 in the first place. Bishop g3, and maybe then bishop g7 or knight g6. Yeah, let's say bishop g7, black can get ready to castle. And here too, I would still play around with the idea of knight d5. Some complicated Smith-Morra business going on here. Bishop d6, yeah, also looks pretty standard. But yeah, that looks way better. So again, that's a line I'm going to look up in Mayhem in the Morra. So b5, bishop takes b5, and let's see what happens if he does take. How play would proceed here. Yep, d5 as I analyzed. Engine definitely prefers bishop g3. Yep. Looks pretty bad here, the two threats. D takes e4, man. There I could win the queen if I play knight c7, because black would have to sack, but knight d6, yeah, also looks really good. King d7, knight takes f7, hitting the queen with check. So black has to sacrifice their queen and try to scrounge up enough play, but yeah, again, not over. I guess black does have 3 minor pieces for the queen, but their king is a big problem. A lot of their pawn cover has been wiped out. Okay, so looks like it was all justified. And what about after g5? I backed the bishop off to g3. I played that pretty quick. Seems fine. Okay, and I was wondering about this decision too. I took on c6, striving for the initiative. Looks good. Yeah, knight takes. And now here comes knight d5. Does the engine like that? It was giving an edge for white, but it's not in the top 3 moves here. Knight d2. Also knight a4. 2 knight moves I didn't consider at all. Like, to me, knight d2 looks like relatively pointless retreat, but I guess the idea is to play f4, or maybe try to get into c4. c4 and then use the d6 square. I don't know. Counterintuitive move. Those backward knight moves, everyone has trouble with them. You guys have seen me miss them a lot. So that would be pretty impressive to find. I mean, I like knight d5, but I am curious what's going to happen if black plays d6 here. Yeah, rook c8 was another move I mentioned, trying to cover the c7 square. Somehow I was a little bit more afraid of d6, because it blocks my pawn from reaching that square, as I was describing. And here, knight e5, the engine really likes. Okay, send the cavalry forward, centralize the knights. Classic strategy, right? And if takes, we take with the bishop, hit the rook. Yeah, bishop f6 or knight f6 is coming. Knight f6 especially. Yeah, this looks bad for black. I like that knight e5 move. So what about d6? d6, engine says, survey says, queen b3. Hit the bishop, okay. And if rook b8, queen c3. Ah, okay. This geometric idea, which I mentioned in another line, but I don't think I considered here. Yeah, come over here, hit the rook, and also maybe be able to play knight f6 check in the future. Yeah, especially if the rook goes here or here. Then knight f6 check is going to be juicy. Land the fork on these two pieces. Nice. Although that's a funny line. I see that doesn't stop there, because take, bishop g7. That queen is trapped, funnily enough. But I guess even here, if we continue the line, I pick up a pawn, and looks like white's doing well. Yeah, the stakes are just so high for black when you get to land this knight d5 move, but even higher when black takes it. So that's interesting to see. d6, go here, attack the bishop, and maybe allow for queen c3. So yeah, after takes... Looks like my instincts were correct that, this is probably the decisive mistake for black. This is already +3 for white. Yeah, so again, if he plays knight e7 or something, I can wedge this pawn in on d6, hit the knight, and always, this is a really good pattern to know, especially if you're an e4 player. This happens a lot. Even happens in some d-pawn openings, actually. But this wedge up here with the pawn, and if they need to put a piece on the file to block, then you're gonna win material, or maybe win material back if you sacrifice something to get there. So bishop e7, take. Yeah, pawn takes, I was mentioning queen b3 looked really good here. The bishop here, I think I said queen c3. Yeah, attacking with the rook also looks good. This is already +7 for white. And how about here, knight d4? Engine approves. John tested, engine approved, kicks. Yeah. Okay. So I'm very happy with how I played this game. I know it was a short one. I know my opponent resigned somewhat prematurely, but just happy with my decision making. That's what I'm most interested in. Don't care about rating, and I really suggest that to you guys. I know that's easy for me to say, but I think this is how you should look at your improvement. Don't focus on that rating, that number so much. Focus on stuff you can control and improve day to day, and make concerted efforts to improve. And the rating will come when you do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this Smith-Morra Gambit game. And I'm going to go watch Rockets Warriors right now, which is starting in 2 minutes. So thanks for watching, guys. And I'll be back again soon with another video.